Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm joined by returning guest and fan favorite, Rachel Harrison, author of the new Such Sharp Teeth. So, Rachel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Oh, I am so excited to have you back on the show. So, your book is officially out in the world now.
It is. Yeah. It's exciting and scary. Equally as exciting as it is terrifying.
Does it change? I mean, this is your third big book out in the world.
I kind of thought it would get easier. And I feel like with Cackle and The Return, I was kind of ready. Like when it came time, I was like, go forth into the world. Like, goodbye. Thanks for the memories. And with this one, I was like, I'm not emotionally prepared to have people read this. So I was hoping it would get easier, but I think it's going to be different every time. It's been a nail biter, this one, because it's like very close to my heart and precious to me. But we getting through it.
Yeah. It's a bit more like vulnerability in this story.
Yeah, so I'm very much like Rory, where I'm like, I don't want to be vulnerable. And like it feels very vulnerable to have this book in particular out in the world.
Loved this story. I think one of the quotes I highlighted was Rory talking about vulnerability and, shutting yourself up and into yourself. There was just so much that I liked about the story, and we will get into that. But for our listeners who are not aware, can you tell them a little bit about Such Sharp Teeth?
So Such Sharp Teeth is about Rory Morris, who is a confident, independent woman in her late 20s. She's very successful. She has like a hotshot life in New York City, and her twin sister, Scarlett, calls her and asks her to come back to their hometown where Scarlett lives. Scarlett is pregnant and estranged from her longtime partner and needs some emotional support. And so Rory drops everything and goes back to be with her sister. And like a week after being home, she runs into Ian, who is a friend from childhood who always had a thing for Rory, and Rory doesn't really do relationships, but she feels kind of a spark that throws her off, and she's thinking about it while she's driving home from seeing him. And while she's distracted, she hits something with her car, and when she gets out to investigate, she is attacked. And she miraculously survives the attack, but her body starts to change, and she starts to go through a transformation physically that forces her to confront some of the emotional things in her past that she's been running away from. And it's kind of body horror, rom-com, creature feature, werewolf book.
And I think the mix of body horror and rom-com worked together so well. Are you a big body horror person?
I am like terrified. What terrifies me most is the lack of control, and we don't have control over our bodies. So body horror does freak me out to an extreme point where sometimes if it's too extreme of body horror, I can't handle it. But it's an interesting like bruise for me to press on to write about body horror because I'm very sensitive to it.
I can see that. One of the quotes I highlighted here that really stuck out to me, and it's a passage I think early on into her after she gets bit, but it's like, my body answers with another heave because I belong to it more than it belongs to me.
Yeah.
I think when we think of werewolves, I don't think we think of it as a feminine thing, but I don't know why we don't.
That's the whole reason I wrote the book, because I was thinking like, how come there's not more lady werewolf content? There's so many parallels there once I started thinking about it that I was surprised there's not a lot in the contemporary horror space. So yeah, once I started writing, I was like, oh, there's a connection and there's a connection and I can pull on this experience. And so it was kind of an easy write in that way.
Yeah, because I think we really only have, I think the thing people probably think of at the top of their heads is ginger snaps.
Yeah, and that was a major influence for me too. But that is like a book about puberty and being a teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
And like part of the reason I wrote the book was I was like, I kind of thought it would get easier to like be in my body. And like, you're warned about puberty, and but then you get older and there's like all other new fun things you discover about existing in your body. And um I was like, I want something that I can relate to now, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to write about the issues I'm going through now versus just having the like, puberty kind of doesn't end, and they don't really tell you that.
They don't. And you're absolutely right. It is like you're getting, I mean, Rory gets bit and she's in her late 20s, and now this is another thing aside from being a woman and everything that comes with that she has to deal with. Now this thing on top of it. Yeah, I feel like very much like this idea of alienness within your own body. And I think you also explore that too through Scarlet being pregnant, and that's a whole other experience of something happening to your body that is so foreign to you.
That you have no control over.
It is quite the experience. What part of the story came to you first?
So it was definitely the concept. Like, I want to write like a lady werewolf book. I usually like think of the concept for like, come up with a concept for a book, and then the character will kind of come next. Like, what character will fit into this story, and like find the voice. And so once I found Rory's voice, then it kind of all came together because I wanted a protagonist. My previous two books, my protagonists are very insecure and like don't have their shit together. And I don't think it would have been as interesting to have the protagonist in a werewolf book be a mess and then get bitten by a werewolf and still be a mess. So I wanted to have somebody who's like, life was great and who like is very confident within herself and everything's going swimmingly, get bit, because then she has to reckon with like, what would that do to her, and what would that force her to confront. And also I was a little bit sick of writing protagonists who feel sorry for themselves, and I wanted to have somebody who, I mean, Rory does feel sorry for herself at some points, but I wanted to write somebody confident. I wanted to like slip into that skin and be with somebody who like doesn't need to like love and accept herself because she already has. It's more about like different challenges. So that's how it all came together.
Yeah, Rory was an interesting protagonist in that way because she is more confident and confrontational than Annie was in Cackle, and brought a different energy. But yeah, I think it made it more interesting when she's exploring this loss of control because she had a certain control over her life and her situation. So bringing this in. And I mean, I will say this book felt, is it weird to say that I felt this book was healing in a way?
I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, I think when I sat down to write it, I didn't expect it to be as like some of the things that came out on the page, I did not anticipate to come out on the page. But there's definitely a lot of heavier stuff that goes down. And I think I wanted to balance out everything, like confronting the heavier issues with like a romance and the like body horror with like familial relationships. So
Yes.
for every like really dark place the book goes to, I think there's an equally like funny moment or light moment to kind of balance it out.
Yeah, there definitely is. And yeah, it does seem like, I mean, we talked about Rory having control over her life, but a lot of that is because she doesn't want to confront or come to face with certain things in her life until she is bit by this werewolf and kind of, in a way, forced to do that because of this new situation and new reality that she's in, too.
Yeah, it's interesting now I'm thinking about it that like me writing this book forced me to confront things I was avoiding as much as getting bitten by a werewolf forces Rory to confront some things that she's been avoiding. But yeah, that's what happens when you bury things deep in your subconscious. They sort of spill out when you don't expect them to.
Yeah. I think we talked about that last time you were on, that, yeah, writing is a form of therapy and you kind of write things out and you're like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm still on that. Still on that pattern where I'm like, ah, yes, this thing that I've been avoiding for how many years.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, but yeah, Cackle and The Return, I think mostly deal with female friendship, and that's I think you do very well. But it was interesting to read this and kind of delve into more complicated familial relationships. So what was that turn like?
I think the stakes needed to be a little bit higher in this book. And as much as like I think friendships are like my friendships are some of the most important relationships I have. Um, for this, it was a lot about Rory wanting to be seen and accepted. And so if you're not seen and accepted by one of your friends, you still can kind of go and make another friend, but you can't like find another sister or another mother. Like those, you can sever those relationships, but if you if there's love there and enough there that the relation you want to save those relationships, how do you do that? And there's a lot like you can't just make another I've already said this, but you can't just make another mother or make another sister. And if you want to salvage those relationships, how can you forgive or open up to them if you've been reluctant to do it in the past? So again, it just seemed like higher stakes to confront those relationships in this book and the greater context of this book. And if Rory, it's kind of like a test of can she forgive her mother? Can she open up to Scarlet? And if she can do those things, how can she like move on and form other relationships in her life, like a romantic connection? So it was kind of functional and served the story better to explore the familial relationships versus friendship. I mean, there's still a complicated friendship in this book, but I wanted to have it be broader because most in the first two books, it's a lot about the protagonist's relationship with themselves. And Rory is pretty much good with herself in this book. It's more about her, how can she be good in her relationships? So there needed to be more of a variety of relationships, and the stakes needed to be higher. That was not an eloquent way of saying my point, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Oh, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, Rory's mother, that was a tough relationship to read on the page, and I think a lot of people are going to relate to at least I think some aspect of that, or some aspect of her relationship with her twin. But I know I tweeted at you, but I was like, wow, just reading this book and finding literally the exact same thing my therapist has told me on this page is like, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because people react differently to the mother, and like she's not like wicked,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that makes it worse because she just the refusing to take responsibility.
Yep.
And also having a parent not stepping into the role of a parent in terms of like you have to be the bigger person even though they're your parent. I think that's a really complicated, shitty thing. And I think a lot of us deal with it to varying degrees in our relationship with our parents. And it's hard to be an adult and reckon with things that you didn't realize were happening in your childhood. And that perspective sometimes is more of a curse than a blessing. So I think it was important to explore that relationship in an honest way, especially like mother-daughter relationships. I think a lot of times, kind of like female friendship, they're either depicted as perfect, like, Gilmore Girls, like we're best friends, or they're depicted as like extremely contentious, like my mother was horrific and would lock me in the closet. And a lot of times they exist in the space between. So, yeah, it was interesting to explore. And I kind of take that like book 4 is a lot about family relationships. So I think it was fun to test new ground too. I don't want to do the same thing every time.
Hmm.
I like to write about female friendship, but if I was just writing about that, I think I would run out of material eventually.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to put yourself in a box, and it's interesting to see like what people can do when they're exploring new ground. And I mean, I don't want to put you in a box right now by being like, I feel like you really capture the millennial experience. But I feel like I've seen a lot of us, I think, being more internal and looking back, and I think examining our familial relationships.
I mean, I am a millennial writer, so I mean, that's one box that I'm like fine being in because I think I feel comfortable being in that box. I feel like, I'm of this generation and I'm always going to be of this generation. So, and I think millennials, we have a certain camaraderie among us.
I think we were just so hated by everyone.
Like older generations think we are lazy and younger generations think we're uncool. But like we've got screwed over on every single like every single layer we've gotten screwed over. And then yeah, and then people are like, you part your hair to the side. Leave us alone.
Let me have my comfort side bangs. Gosh. Let me use the cringy cry laughing emoji. Just let me be.
Is that emoji? Do they think that emoji is cringe? Because I
Yes. The youth do. They have the whole I mean, I'm on TikTok, so I see a lot of the Gen Z takes on millennial derogatory all the things we do. The skinny jeans, the calling our dogs doggo, Instagram captioning we did a thing, all the things they make fun
they're
of us
so
for.
mean. They're so brutal.
I'm like, "Oh, I forgot what bullying felt like. It's this."
You know what though? They've never known the joy of a Delia's catalog, so
Or the emotional roller coaster of a MySpace top 8,
yeah, yeah, yeah. They grew up with social media, so I have some empathy for them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I also like my emojis. So
Oh, I do. I'm like, I'm cringy, and that's fine. I love pumpkin spice lattes. I love Taylor Swift. Like, I am a cringy millennial. That's 100% okay.
that is fine. I haven't figured out TikTok yet, and now I'm too scared. I'm a bad millennial. Like I wasn't even on Instagram for the longest time. So
Really?
yeah, I only got on it when like before the return was coming out. Then I started getting tagged in reviews, and I was like, "Get me off this thing."
That's got to be one of the worst parts of being someone who puts your work out there for the world is people like I mean, obviously everyone is entitled to their opinion of their work, but I think the the tagging you and like this was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was bad for me then was I didn't know what to expect. And you get tagged in really lovely, beautiful things too that like you're like this is so nice. Like I feel so seen. But yeah, I just wasn't expecting it. And so that was interesting. I feel like I treat my Instagram as like part of my job. Like I don't like really post a lot of personal things on there. I'm not like, look at me at my local Starbucks. It's mostly just me being like, look at my book. So it's fine. It's just social media is interesting. I can't imagine like growing up with like being in middle school and having Instagram. Like being in middle school in general is miserable. And
Oh
then
my
like
gosh, yeah.
having to deal with kids outside of that. Oh, yeah. No thanks.
We did get lucky with that because yeah, Instagram came out when I was in college, and I remember that was a big thing at the time. Everyone had to be on Instagram and see what everyone was doing, and so yeah, I can't imagine that for the younger generations having to be so performative all the time. Like that is so draining.
Yeah. And that's why they get mad at us. And they think we're uncool for our pumpkin spice lattes. But then they've copped our style now.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're wearing butterfly clips.
Yeah.
So
I know. I walked through Target the other day. I'm like, is this like bright rainbow shirt? I had this shirt. I had these like flared jeans. Like, what is this?
Yeah, it's all the like late 90s, early 2000s have come back. So they can tell us that we aren't cool, but again, they're copying our style and they'll never know the joy of like purchasing a CD or the Borders bookstore.
Oh, yeah. CDs were so expensive, though.
They were, yeah. DVDs.
Mm-hmm. My gosh, my first DVD was I got for my birthday. I got like the first X-Men, and the Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, Charlie's Angels.
Uh, Two classics.
Yeah, I'm like the best. But anyway, back to
We went on a millennial tangent, but we're
oh,
entitled.
we are entitled, as both generations that sandwich us would say. Actually, I'm sorry, Gen X. I know you all keep being the forgotten child.
Yeah,
In
that's
this,
true.
I'm sorry. Another thing I found interesting is like, especially I think with Cackle and Such Sharp Teeth, they both feature protagonists that are in kind of not liminal, like transitory, but like moving from the city to a smaller town and kind of trying it on for size and seeing how they feel about it. Was that an intentional choice?
It was a lot. Such Sharp Teeth, I had already left Brooklyn, but even in the return too, it was a lot of like, I know I'm not going to be in the city forever, and like testing out, like shoving my characters first and letting them fall and see how they felt about it. So it was kind of like me playing out my own fear of leaving the city through them, um, and then through Rory as well. Um, but I think I'm done with like the returning, like the small town. I'm terrified of leaving the city thing, because I've done it now and I feel okay. But it was, again, it's just an internal coping mechanism that came out through my work, about, and for horror in general, like small towns are very functional for scary shit. So part of it was function and part of it was like, again, me working out my issues. My
And
books
writing is
sound super
therapy.
fun that way when I describe them that way.
Was there a different approach this time? Because in Cackle, Annie's trying on, like, she takes this job in this town that she's new to, that she's never been. Whereas Such Sharp Teeth, she's kind of going back to her hometown in a place she was familiar with that she, left, went to the city, and is now coming back to.
I think, again, it was functional because
Yeah.
like she had to confront her past and like she's literally running from this place that she went back to. And I think also like sometimes we tell ourselves I'll be happier somewhere else, and it's not the truth. And I think this whole time she's been telling herself that she's happy in the city, but she's not. Like she still has these things that, like these burdens that she's carrying around that she's probably not fully conscious of. Um, and then she doesn't like to go back home because it's uncomfortable, because she has to confront those things and she can't, tuck them away and not think about them. But eventually, again, eventually the things you suppress will find their way out. And so I think it's healthy. It's uncomfortable, but it's healthy that she's back and that she confronts these things. And ultimately, it's like probably for the best that everything that happens to her in the book happens to her, because it's not like there was going to be a reckoning eventually. And I just think like hometowns are so fun. You like run into all these old friends, old rivals, and it's familiar, but you're not different than when you were there. There's a lot to play with hometowns.
It felt very lived in too.
It's definitely like based on like my hometown in New Jersey. I've had two of my friends text me and they're like, "Really, the corner pub?" And I'm like, "Yes," which is a real place. It's cooler in the book, but it is a real place where like if you go, you will see 10 people from high school at least.
Fun. It was a nice little Easter egg for people you grew up with. Yeah, I don't know. I just remember reading the scene where like Ash has hosts the Halloween party, and I was like, I have been to this party. Like every single description, I'm like, I've been to this party, and you know what? It was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, I would love to go to the parties. Even though like Rory's like, I'm above this. Like
Yeah.
I was writing it and I was like, I'm not above it. I'd be in costume. All the snack tables sound amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of this like cheesy millennial like hosting a Halloween party with like themed snacks, and I'm like, that's fun. I would do that.
And I like those plastic dinosaur costumes. They're hilarious.
Let us be cheesy with our cheesiness. One part I thought was really fun was I mean, as Rory, I think, comes to terms with what's happening to her pretty quickly. And I think her research into like what's going on, I think, is really funny, what that looks like in the modern world.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, what would I do? And I would Google. Like, that's what I would do. I think that's what anyone would do. And I did Google. And then some of it is like a lot of it's like based on what I found on Google. Like there was a very earnest I found like a very earnest posting on a message board somewhere that was like, well, if you get bitten by a werewolf, you need to buy a dog crate and you need to like get snacks. I recommend rotisserie chickens and it's gonna suck, but like I was like frank and straight to the point. And that made it into the book where like she goes online and someone's just like, it's gonna be super painful and like lock yourself up in a dog crate and good luck. So the internet's a weird place, uh, but it's exactly where I would go. And it like it also like I think a lot of like the body horror in the book I tried to make feel like it was grounded. And if you have any like for me, if I have any symptoms, I'm always on like WebMD. And it's always like you're fucked. And so I just thought like that would be kind of fun to incorporate. Not fun, but like a nod to incorporate into the book where it's like, I have a headache. And WebMD is like, you are, good luck. You're not going to make it.
Yeah, you're terminally ill.
Yeah. And that kind of element of being like, I was bitten by a werewolf and then internet just being like, well, have fun with that.
Well, I think also, I mean, in this situation, it's not like you're really going to find a cure. This is just something you are stuck with for the rest of your life. And I hope you're ready to find a way to make that work into your life because this is your new reality.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it a lot in the terms of menstruation, but also like chronic illness.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with some chronic health issues and just thinking about that where it's like, yeah, it sucks, but you just have to deal with it and keep going. And, you know, I think a lot of times if you hear about certain medical conditions or, you know, I remember being like 10 and reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And my mom being like, yeah, this is a thing that happens. And me being like, what are you talking about? That sounds horrific. I cannot believe that I'm just supposed to keep living my life when years and years I'm going to have to deal with this once a month. And I just couldn't fathom it. And then it happens and you're like, all right, like you just keep going. Like it.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to think about that in terms of like lycanthropy, where it's like, how horrific would it be once a month to be in excruciating pain and to turn into a monster and then to wake up the next day and to just have to deal with it. And it like thinking about it seems unmanageable, but if it happened to you, you probably would just be like, okay, like figure out a way to deal with it and keep going because you would have no other choice. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting to me to think about. And especially like when she's like playing with her wound and stuff, like all that stuff felt very realistic to me because I'm like a scab picker and, you know, like I shouldn't be doing this, but like, look at this gross thing on my body. Like there's part of it that's like, I don't know, intriguing. Our bodies are wild things.
They really are. And I mean, yeah, I think that would be normal to try to test the limits of what has just happened to you and what this means. I was going to say for you, it was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. For me, it was the American Girl, like the Care and Keeping of You.
I had that one too. Yeah. That one was, I feel like, scary, but I felt like there were like illustrations and I felt like it walked you through like a nice pace.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like Are You There, God It's Me, Margaret was like outdated when I read it. So I was like, what is this belt they're describing? Like it sounded like way intense. Yeah, and then at the end, somebody runs over their foot with a lawnmower, and now like I won't mow the lawn because I'm like afraid.
Mad Men style.
Yeah, yeah. Mad Men and Judy Bloom.
Was that a fear people had in the 60s and 70s?
I don't know. It was very strange. But like I remember it. Those are the two things I remember about the book. The violence, which is now when I write horror.
I guess this classic like coming of age story. What I remember is the one violent scene. I do have some Patreon questions. I would say they're more comments, but questions from Patreon supporters. Annette says, "Hi, Rachel. No question. I just want to say thank you for writing about life issues that resonate with me as a woman. I'm really looking forward to such sharp teeth. I love the idea of exploring female rage and change through the werewolf trope."
Oh, thank you. Yeah, rage was another thing. I haven't.
Yeah, we didn't get into that.
Yeah, I think I like don't really experience my rage very often. It kind of comes out in like strange, weird ways at weird times. But yeah, it was a little bit cathartic to think about like beating the shit out of something, which like, I don't know, like the rage room or just to like be in a body that's like super powerful. And like, how would I feel to have like it's painful and it's horrific to transform into the werewolf, but like how would it feel to actually be the wolf and to like be in power and not have to be afraid of anything? That was like cathartic, and I don't know, it was kind of nice to think about that. There's a scene in the book where like Rory's with some guy and he's kind of creepy and she's just like, he doesn't think he's in danger, but like I wonder what it's like to like never think that you're in danger. And it was interesting when I was writing it, I was like, yeah, like some people walk around and they don't know what it's like to feel afraid. And what would it be like if like you stepped into a form where you didn't have to be afraid because you were powerful? And that was fun to think about. And then the rage stuff, I guess I would just tap into from some deep place of me, that because it's hard, like, you know, I think of like angry women as, you know, being not being taken seriously or being shrill or dismissed, and how would that translate into if you were a monster? And like there's an interesting question in the book that comes up is like, you know, one character doesn't want to control their rage and another character's like, we kind of have to control our rage or else we'll do damage. And some of that stuff I brought up in the book and I don't really have answers to. It was just like there's a lot there that I don't think we really get an avenue to explore as women.
Yeah, and I loved the way that was handled. I think, I mean, societally, I think the way we view men's anger versus women's anger is the thing that's.
Yeah. And I feel like in general, like an angry man is kind of cool in terms of like, I'm thinking of like fiction or like, you know, like a John Wick or something like that. But if there's like, I'm thinking of like female revenge stories and how they're received. And
well, even in those stories, I feel like they still have to be like this cool, calm, like I'm doling out revenge, but I'm hardly breaking a sweat. Like I'm not really getting worked up or emotional about it. Like I'm just coolly watching you suffer. Like you don't really even get to like delve into the rage of it.
yeah, they don't get to be red faced and screaming. Like they still have to be beautiful and put together. Yeah, how we experience our rage is interesting, and how we are allowed to. Like if we were raised in a way where we could express our anger, or we weren't told to, be polite or be quiet or things like that, how would our rage manifest? And, for me, like, and I'm sure a lot of us will never really know what to do with our anger, because from a young age we were told how we are supposed to deal with it. So if there's a way that we would have experienced it organically, otherwise we've been kind of trained not to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to think about. I don't really have answers to a lot of questions that I raise in my books, but it's just hopefully opening doors to conversations.
I think we should all just go into a rage room. I think it should be something that we get like a credit for. Maybe like every quarter we can go and just go nuts.
Should be government subsidized.
Yeah. Jocelyn also says, please tell Rachel that her corresponding playlist that she made is excellent and got me through my working week. And I'm very excited to start such sharp teeth. Love a woman werewolf so much.
I appreciate that, because actually music was like a really important part of writing this book for me. And like the song Communication by the Cardigans was like, to me, it's like Rory and Ian's song. And when I was writing scenes between them, I would play it. So I'm very proud of that playlist, and I'm glad someone listened to it, because I was hoping they would. Yeah, again, as a millennial, I take my playlists very seriously.
Do you think it's because we came from like the last generation to have mixtapes?
Yeah, like burning CDs and like putting a lot of thought into it. So yeah, I take my playlist very seriously, and I appreciate listening to it.
It is a good playlist. Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to, as I said, I am a chuggy millennial Taylor Swift fan. So I was listening to Evermore and Folklore, and 'Tis the Damn Season I was listening to, and I'm like, this is very Ian and Rory, like coming back home, and like the guy that was always there, like the path not taken, but he like knows you better than anybody else could ever know you. It's like, oh, and then of course Mad Woman from Folklore. I'm like, there we go. No one likes a mad woman. It's a shame she went mad.
Yeah. And I'll confess, all writers have this thought about famous people. I was like, I feel like Taylor would like cackle when Folklore and Evermore came out. It's like, I feel like this would be her vibe.
Oh, 100%. And on it, we don't know what Midnights will hold, but it could be a pretty Such Sharp Teeth adjacent vibe, because it seems a bit more rockish.
Yeah. Somebody has to slip it to her.
Does anybody know Taylor's publicist?
Yeah.
I really think Taylor would be a Rachel Harrison fan.
It's such a like smug thought. I mean, we all have thoughts like that sometimes, where we'll see someone famous and be like, I feel like we'd be friends. But as like writers, I feel like maybe I'm alone. Maybe I'm just like narcissistic. I'm like, maybe, like I feel like there's something there.
It's funny. I was reading Mindy Kaling's memoir, because I love Mindy Kaling, because again, I am a chuggy ass millennial who grew up on The Office. And in her memoir, she's like, a lot of people think that they would be friends with me. And I'm like, okay, yes. And she's like, actually, I'm really annoying and you should talk to my real life friends. And I'm like, no, I could deal with that. I'm always like the introverted, quiet one with like very loud, extroverted friends. So actually, we would be good friends.
We would be a good match. I could see it.
Oh, I did want to talk to you about Bad Dolls, because when you came on last year and I was going on my whole thing about how I hate dolls, and you just coyly said like, oh, maybe there's something coming out for you soon. You were talking about this.
I was, yeah. The last story, so not every story is about creepy dolls.
Yeah.
The first story is about a creepy 8-ball. The second story is about a bad bachelorette party. The third is about a dieting app that's like horrific, and then the third is about a possessed porcelain doll.
I think my favorite story was the bachelorette party one. So I did want to ask.
A bridesmaid.
I haven't had any nightmare bridesmaid scenarios. I was going to ask if you had. You don't have to like put anyone on blast. No.
I what I will say is that I was reading So Happy for You by Celia Lasky, which is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. It's not horror, but it's um like a dark thrillery vibe. It's just a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. But it's very similar in terms of like the content. And I was like, it's so weird that like both of us would have this concept. And then I was like, oh no, we've just both been bridesmaids. Um, but I just think it, in general, not just me being a bridesmaid, but my friends being bridesmaids and hearing about this like wedding industry where it's not just like you're a bridesmaid anymore. You have to show up to the bridal shower and the bachelorette weekend, and then you have to show up to the wedding, and like it's like thousands and thousands of dollars, and there's lots of expectations and gifts and dresses, and it's just, to me it seems very ridiculous. And so, I mean, but again, if it makes you happy, like if that's your thing, then go for it. I got married on a Tuesday and then like got pancakes and went bowling. So like, I'm that was what I wanted to do. If you want to have like a huge wedding and do all that stuff, go for it. But yeah, to me, I was just like, what would be the next thing besides like all of these things that are asked of bridesmaids? Like what more could be asked? Yeah. So that's how that story came to be. But if you had a bad time being a bridesmaid at any point, that's the story for you. And if you loved being a bridesmaid and that's your whole thing, good for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're the maid of honor in that scenario. I think, well, for mine, I had like like a small church wedding, but the night before my like bachelorette party, my bridesmaids just came over and we like ordered pizza and watched Zombieland and had like a slumber party.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
Not like the like, all right, we're gonna go out and we're all gonna wear matching outfits and like matching sashes and this. Oh.
Yeah. My sister-in-law, who's like very extroverted, and I don't know how she like meets this many people, but she's in weddings all the time. And she was telling me she was just in one that was in Charleston, which I guess is the new like bachelorette party destination. And she was telling me that she had a very type A bride friend who they were going to take pictures on this like rainbow street, and everyone needed to have a certain color dress. Everyone was going to be assigned like a certain color bathing suit for like all the Instagram photos. And I'm like, that sounds like an absolute nightmare. And it was after I had read the story. I was like, ooh, this is given bad doll vibes.
This is given bachelorette.
Yeah, this is given bachelorette. And I wanted to say that first story, the Magic 8 Ball, I found out you're a big Twilight Zone fan.
Yes, I am obsessed with the Twilight Zone. I have it everywhere. I have a Twilight Zone lamp in my desk, and I have a huge Rod Serling print on my wall. I'm a big Twilight Zone fan, and that story is a little Twilight Zone-y.
Yeah. I couldn't put my finger on it, and then I'd read somewhere that you were a big Twilight Zone fan. I'm like, that's it. Like, I remember an episode that had kind of a similar vibe to it, and I absolutely loved it. I also am obsessed with the Twilight Zone. What's your favorite?
Probably episode? To Serve Man is the classic. Yeah, it's hard to beat that one in terms of like how memorable it is. But I mean, there are so many good ones. I will say the Talkie Tina episode was on at midnight 2019 into 2020. So like now I like will never watch that episode again because 2020 was such a cursed year, and I like blame Talkie Tina. Like I feel like that had something to do with it. So I won't watch that episode again. The rest I will put on a marathon and just have the time of my life.
Oh yeah.
What about you?
I do love To Serve Man. Like there's a lot of like weird ones that really stick out to me. It's like the 4 characters in Search of an Exit I really like. I also really like the ones that deal with nostalgia. Even though I think I have like a weird relationship with nostalgia, like the one where the man is in the boarding house and finds like the radio where he hears like the big band music and he starts spiraling, and he like refuses to see his real life in front of him because he is just like stuck to this radio. Or like I'm so bad with titles, but like the episode early on where like the guy's car breaks down and he goes back to the street, and it's like the street where he grew up, and he sees like the younger version of himself and his parents. Like that one is, I really enjoy those, and I know those aren't the like horror spooky ones, but I think he just does that so well.
Some of the more understated ones are really beautiful. And I like The Hitchhiker. That one, I
Oh,
guess, is pretty scary.
yes. Yeah, that's a really
Um,
good one.
A Most Unusual Camera is another good one. For some reason, that one, it's not like classics. It's not like the dummy one scary, but like for some reason, that one really scares me. Where they take a picture and it's like the um whatever that is on the photograph, it's like a few seconds into the future.
Will the real Martian please stand up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one's good. There's so many good ones.
I know it's there's
Yeah.
a ton. I also really like the Last Train to Willoughby. That's another like
Yeah,
kind of
that's a nostalgia
nostalgia
one.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I love
Oh,
that brand of Twilight Zone episode.
yeah, and Black Mirror, I feel like the equivalent in Black Mirror would be like San Junipero, where it's like
Hmm.
sometimes the more emotional ones are the standout versus the ones that are like going somewhere dark.
I've toyed with the idea. I like 2 years ago of doing like a Twilight Zone read alike episode. Like if you like this episode, read this book. But I was worried. I know the show is so old, but I'm like, a lot of the episodes are so twist dependent that am I giving it away by telling you that you would like this book if you would like this episode? And I got so close. I still have the Google Doc here.
I mean, I vote do it, but take it from where it comes. Um, yeah, but I feel like a lot of them too are very atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one with the slot machine, I feel like that's a specific vibe that you could find a book with a similar. Yeah, that's a fun thought experiment too, to just think about like books that would fit certain episodes. I love doing shit like that.
Yeah. If you want to come on for that, let me
I
know.
would love to.
Yeah, I remember because I even asked like online and I got so many responses because I asked like, what's your favorite episode? It was a lot of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, To Serve Man. It was like 2 years ago too.
Drag it back up.
Is there a book you've enjoyed recently?
So I'm currently reading This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. Have you read it?
Yes.
I'm like 3/4 of the way through it and I'm so obsessed with it. It's just like I get every few pages and I'm just like, this fucking book. Like I just like I'm blown away by it. I'm so blown away by it. I can't I will recommend this book until I'm blue in the face. It's if you are listening and haven't read it yet, it is stunningly beautiful and will break your heart and scare the ever living daylights out of you. You
Yeah.
must read. And I feel like it's kind of flown under the radar. But everybody should read it.
That first chapter just absolutely broke my heart when he's at his wife's funeral and he's like talking to her. Oh my gosh, it was heart wrenching.
Yeah, and it gets better / worse.
Yeah. So that is a good one. Well, can you tell us anything you're working on now?
So I'm waiting for edits on book 4, which I kind of teased as like a family drama. But
Ooh.
the last time I was on this podcast, I was talking about Malignant. And this book, to me, I wanted to kind of bridge the gap between like an Ari Aster, Hereditary, like kind of arty, like family drama, and like Malignant, like the like that shit craziness of Malignant, the like fun horror camp and like very like servicing in the genre, versus like what they call like elevated horror. So I kind of wanted to like play in a space between them. And so that's what book 4 is. And it's a family drama about a young woman who's estranged from her family and returns home to her small hometown. It's not just, it is kind of a small hometown, but it's not. And kind of things go from there. It's the first book I've written that there's like going to be spoilers. Like, so it's interesting for me to have to like figure out how I'm going to pitch it and talk about it. Yeah. But that's the general gist of it.
Ooh,
and
I
it should be out
am
next October. So
okay.
I, as you know, very intrigued, and I need to know how Malignant and Ari Aster esque horror come together. But if anyone can do it, you can.
oh, we'll see.
If we did like a body horror werewolf rom com that somehow felt healing to me and probably to a lot of other people, you can do this.
Oh, I hope so. I try and do something like challenge myself every book to try something a little bit different. So it's rolling the dice a little bit, but it was really fun. Like I had so much fun writing such sharp teeth that when I like sat down to write this fourth book, I was like, I want to have as much fun as possible. So that's really like all you can control as a writer is how much you enjoy the writing. So I had a blast writing it so far, and I hope it'll be a fun read.
Very exciting. Well, we have a tradition on the show to ask our guests for a chilling obsession, so something in horror that you've enjoyed recently.
Um, so I'm obsessed with the Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. Uh, like I'm gonna be Mercy for Halloween. I have to like figure out how to get a Polaroid camera on the cheap, but I absolutely love that book. And if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. And I guess like just getting excited also for the Cabin at the End of the World adaptation. Intrigued to see how it is. So I guess just like I have to like stop talking about Paul Tremblay on podcasts because he's going to take out a restraining order. But I really just love the Pallbearers Club. And I'm looking forward to Cabin at the End of the World. Knock at the Cabin, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how it's adapted.
Yeah, I think we're all in the horror,
yeah.
in like the book horror world. We're all like, we'll see, M. Night, we'll see.
Yeah, he's a director with a reputation, so we will see. Because it's a book I loved that freaked me out. I'm sure it'll be scary. I'm just interested to see how it translates.
Yeah, all of the horror book world is gonna walk in, just like we'll see.
You peasants didn't read the book. Excuse me.
It's actually based. We're all gonna walk in with our copies.
I don't know if you know, sir. This is actually based on a Paul Tremblay novel. I just watched Deadstream on Shudder last night. Just like influencer found footage horror. I do love like influencer horror.
Was it good?
Like,
It was fun, and I felt really dumb because I was like halfway through the movie, and I'm like, Deadstream, like the opposite of a live stream.
I didn't get it either, to be fair.
But I was like watching it, I'm like, and it just clicked. I'm like,
oh, wow, I see what you did there.
but it was a ton of fun. I think maybe because my son is 8 and he watches a lot of these obnoxious YouTube personalities. I'm like, no, yeah, that is what they're like. You're really nailing that obnoxious, high energy,
Like,
Hey
hey
guys, like
guys.
subscribe.
yeah. So if you don't like that, I mean, it's a lot of that for the movie, but it's a YouTuber who's going to a haunted house and he's like live streaming the whole thing. So you kind of see like little chats pop up on the sides and he like interacts with people. And yeah, it is like fun. It gets like the supernatural, spooky, scary, and like a lot of really good like visual stuff. It wasn't like super scary, but it was a fun, good time.
Have you? So I watched Mr. Harrigan's Phone on Netflix. Have you seen that one?
No, because I have the story, and I'm like, now I need to like read it before I watch it. So I'm like waiting until I do that. Was it good?
I was surprised by it. It wasn't. It wasn't bad. I wasn't like blown away. I was just surprised. It wasn't like from the trailer, and like I shouldn't say this because I get upset when people are like, I thought it was going to be scarier about my books, but like I thought it was going to be scarier about it just wasn't as scary as I thought. it was going to be based on the trailer. So, not I still enjoyed it, but I was just surprised that it didn't lean more into the horror.
All right, so I'll keep that in mind going in.
Yeah, it's still worth watching. Great performances. But yeah, I was surprised because I mean I was expecting the last Stephen King adaptation I saw was It, so I was ready to be to buckle up. But I wasn't familiar with the story, so maybe I wasn't. Maybe reading the story first, you'll go in and kind of know what to expect more. So
yeah. Have you been watching that 101 Scariest Movie Moments on Shudder?
I haven't. No, I intended to watch it in October, and then my schedule slowly filled up. But I'm hoping to get to it before October or before Halloween.
Yeah, they've been doing an episode a week, so it's still not even all the way through. But it was just some good movie moments that I had forgotten about. I'm oh yeah, that was a good one. Annihilation. I'm oh yeah, Annihilation is not one that I would have even thought to put on the list, but you are correct. Yes.
The bear in Annihilation. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I want to watch it. I have to reignite my motivation.
Well, our second tradition on this podcast is to ask our guests for a final girl song. So Rachel, what is your song?
So it's actually a song that was on the Such Sharp Teeth playlist, and it's Stay Soft by Mitski. I'm a Mitski super fan. I don't know if that makes me a basic millennial or if that makes me cool in Gen Z.
I think it is cool.
Okay. So I'm very cool, everybody. I'm a Mitski super fan. But Stay Soft is out as from her most recent album, Laurel Hell. And it's a very upbeat song that the lyrics are very anytime I'm feeling sorry for myself or I feel oh, I have such thin skin, I'll listen to Stay Soft, and it puts me in a good headspace where I feel back in touch with my punk self. And so it's a good mood, and it's a perfect final girl song.
Ooh. I will add that to the list. I don't think we have any Mitski on there, but I'm excited to put her on.
I'm honored to be the first person to add it on. I have to go back and look at the playlist now because I looked at it I had it up last year, but time has gone by, so I need to go back and see what everyone else has put on.
It was equally as eclectic. Gotten some, a lot of interesting stuff Clea McLeod Chapman did Neutral Milk Hotel. Then I had someone put Lizzo on there. It is an eclectic mix.
I'm excited to give it a listen.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I have chaotic energy today, but this has been so fun, and thanks for having me on again.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll do it again next year.
For sure. Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at Books Freezer Pod, on Instagram and TikTok at Books in the Freezer, and you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com, where you can find titles of the books mentioned in today's episodes, as well as several ways to support the show, including becoming a Patreon supporter and affiliate links. And if you're looking for a free and easy way to show your support, you can always leave a quick one-sentence review on a site like Apple Podcasts. I'm pretty sure you can literally write just good podcast. And I mean, ideally leave a 5-star rating, but you do what you want. And on Spotify, it's pretty easy. You don't actually type anything. I think if you've listened to the podcast through Spotify, you're able to just leave a star rating. So big thank you to all of you who have taken the time to do that. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Instagram at That's What She Read. That's with 2 A's, and Twitter, I mean, if it'll still be around, at Lady_Gagnon. That's LADYGAGNON. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.